The great hall of the alien palace was carved from black stone that shone like glass. Tall pillars stretched upward, holding the weight of history and pride. At the center of this hall stood the alien queen, her silver crown gleaming, her golden cloak flowing behind her. Her people bowed as she lifted her hand, but her eyes were fixed on the strange figure walking slowly toward her, the human chosen to be her husband. He did not look like the warriors of her empire. He was not covered in scales, nor did he carry the heavy muscles of her generals. His skin was pale compared to theirs, his build lean and his movements measured. His clothes were simple, dark fabric with no shining armor, no badge of rank. Many in the hall whispered among themselves, their voices dripping with doubt. "Is this the one?" a noble muttered. "He looks weak," another said. "He will not last a week in her palace." But the human, whose name was Daniel, did not lower his head. His eyes stayed steady, calm and respectful. He looked at the queen not as if she were a creature from another world, but as if she were simply another person, powerful, yes, but also mortal like himself. The queen, Arthelia, studied him closely. She had agreed to this marriage for one reason: peace. Her empire had been at the edge of war with Earth's colonies. To prevent bloodshed, the council demanded that she unite with one of their kind. She had chosen Daniel not because she saw greatness in him, but because he had volunteered when others stepped back. To her it seemed almost like pity. He was just a human, fragile and ordinary. She expected him to bow, to obey, to stay silent in her shadow. When he reached her throne, he bent his head slightly in respect, but his voice was firm. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "I stand here as your husband by choice, not by force. I will honor this bond." His words surprised her. Most humans spoke with nervous fear when facing her, but this one spoke with calmness, not arrogance, not weakness, just steady truth. The ceremony was swift, bound by tradition. Alien priests chanted, weaving threads of light around them. The crown on her head glowed as symbols appeared in the air, marking the union. When it was done, the nobles clapped politely, though many faces were stiff with doubt. The queen kept her expression unreadable, but inside she felt a small ripple of confusion. Later, in the quiet of her private chamber, Arthelia sat with Daniel. She wanted to test him, to see what kind of man had dared to marry her. "You understand. This is not love," she said coldly. "It is duty. My people needed peace. You were convenient." Daniel nodded. "I understand. I did not expect your heart, only your respect. Peace is worth more than pride." The queen frowned. His answer was strange. Most men in her court would have begged for her attention or tried to boast of themselves. But this human simply spoke of respect. He did not try to win her with words. He did not fear her anger either. In the days that followed, Daniel explored the palace. He walked through long corridors lined with glowing stones, through gardens where alien plants shone with soft blue light, through training grounds where soldiers sparred with heavy weapons. Wherever he went, the nobles whispered, "Look at him, wandering like a lost child. He is unfit for our queen. He will bring shame." Yet Daniel never answered their scorn. He studied their ways quietly. He asked questions not with pride but with genuine interest. When he saw a soldier sharpening a blade that curved like a crescent moon, he asked about the metal. When he passed a cook stirring a pot of glowing broth, he asked about the spices. He did not laugh at their customs, nor did he complain that they were strange. He simply listened, learned, and remembered. One evening he found himself watching a group of palace guards. They noticed him and smirked. "Human husband," one said mockingly, "do you think you could lift this spear?" He handed Daniel a weapon as tall as 2 men, its shaft made of dense metal. Daniel tried to lift it, but it was heavy, far beyond what human muscles were meant to carry. The guards laughed. "See? Weak as a twig. Not fit to protect a queen." Daniel set the spear down gently and looked at them. "You are right," he said calmly. "I am not strong in the same way you are, but strength takes many forms. Even the smallest hand can strike the right place to change the course of a battle." The guards laughed again, but when Daniel walked away, one of them frowned. His words stayed in their minds, curious and unsettling. From a balcony above, Queen Arthelia had been watching. She had expected him to grow angry, to snap back with sharp words, or to walk away in shame. Instead, he showed patience and something else, wisdom. She did not admit it aloud, but she felt a spark of interest. At night, during their shared meals, Daniel never pushed himself into her space. He spoke only when spoken to, but when he did, his words were thoughtful. He asked about her empire, not to flatter, but to understand. "What drives your people to keep conquering?" he asked one evening. "To survive," she answered. "In this galaxy, only the strongest endure." He nodded. "Then survival is not just about strength. It is about balance, about knowing when to fight and when to hold back." She looked at him for a long moment, wondering how such words came from, one she had dismissed as ordinary. The whispers in the court grew louder. Nobles mocked her choice openly now. "The queen has married a weakling," they sneered. Some even suggested that the council should replace him. But Arthelia, though proud, did not bend to their pressure. Something deep inside her told her to wait, to watch. One night, as she stood on the high balcony overlooking her capital, she saw Daniel standing silently at her side. He did not speak for a long time, and neither did she. Finally, he said, "Your city is beautiful. But beauty can also be fragile if left unguarded." She turned to him sharply. "Are you saying my city is weak?" He shook his head. "No. I am saying that even strong walls can fall if no one notices the cracks." Arthelia stared at him, and for the first time since their union, she felt something unusual. Respect. She did not yet know that beyond the horizon, forces were already moving against her. Rebels, generals, and old enemies were waiting for the chance to strike. Soon the queen would discover that this quiet human, whom everyone called weak, would reveal a strength no one expected, one that could change the destiny of her empire. The palace was alive with noise each morning. Trumpets echoed across the stone walls, soldiers marched in lines, and servants hurried with trays of food and scrolls. For Queen Arthelia, this was normal life, filled with discipline and order. But for Daniel, the human who had become her husband, it was still new and strange. He did not wake to the sound of roosters or morning bells as on Earth. Instead, the first thing he heard was the rumble of alien drums that signaled the start of training for the royal guard. From his chamber he could see them, hundreds of warriors moving in perfect rhythm, their spears flashing in the morning sun. Their armor glowed with strange patterns, alive with shifting light. Daniel watched them with calm eyes, studying their movements as if memorizing every detail. Many soldiers looked up at him, their faces twisted in mockery. Some saluted sarcastically, as if to remind him that he was nothing compared to them. Daniel did not answer. He simply raised his hand in return, a quiet acknowledgement, and went on with his day. Inside the palace, life was no easier. Alien nobles moved like shadows through the halls, their robes long and glittering, their voices sharp with pride. They whispered every time he walked past. "Why is he here?" one asked. "Our queen deserves better," another hissed. "He is not worthy." Daniel heard them, but he did not let the words touch his heart. Instead, he focused on learning. He visited the library, where walls were covered with glowing symbols instead of books. He asked the keepers to explain the history of the Queen's empire. He learned about old wars, great victories, and terrible defeats. The librarians were surprised at his interest, for most outsiders mocked their traditions. But Daniel listened patiently, repeating their stories back to them until he understood. At meals, when he sat beside the Queen, he noticed the smallest details. While others laughed and filled their plates with glowing fruits and steaming meats, Daniel took little food and asked questions about what was before him. "This fruit," he said one evening, holding a crystal-like berry, "grows only near rivers. Am I right?" The cook nodded in shock. "How did you know, human?" Daniel smiled. The taste of the water is inside it. I grew up near rivers. Queen, sitting beside him, glanced at him curiously. His ability to notice such details was not normal for most humans, or even for many of her own people, but not everyone was impressed. The palace guards, proud of their strength, decided to test him again. One evening, as Daniel walked through the courtyard, they blocked his way. Their leader, a tall warrior with red armor, grinned cruelly. "Human husband," he said, his voice heavy with mockery. "Do you dare face us in a test of skill?" Daniel raised his brow. "What kind of test?" "A race," the warrior replied. "From this gate to the far tower, whoever loses must kneel." The guards laughed, confident in their speed and power. The queen, who had been returning from council at that moment, stopped to watch. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. She wanted to see what Daniel would do. The race began. The guards sprinted like beasts, their feet pounding against the stone, their armor rattling. Daniel ran too, his stride smooth but not as fast as theirs. Soon, they were far ahead. The crowd of nobles who gathered laughed loudly, pointing at the human struggling behind. But Daniel's face was calm. He kept his pace steady, never slowing, never forcing himself to match their speed. As the guards reached the halfway point, their heavy breathing began to show. Their armor weighed them down, their speed faltered, and still Daniel kept running, his steps even, his breath controlled. By the time they neared the far tower, the guards were exhausted, their strength fading. Daniel, though slower, did not tire. He passed one, then another, until only the leader remained ahead. With quiet determination, Daniel reached the tower just as the leader stumbled, unable to finish. The crowd fell silent. The guards looked at him in disbelief. He had not been faster, but he had been wiser. He had known his limits, had paced himself, and had endured where they had not. The queen's lips curved in the faintest smile. She did not praise him openly, but her eyes betrayed her admiration. Later that night, Arthelia confronted him. "You knew you could not match their speed," she said. "Yet you raced anyway. Why?" Daniel answered simply. "Because sometimes strength is not about winning in the beginning. It is about lasting until the end." Her heart stirred at his words. She had always believed survival came from raw power, from crushing enemies quickly. But this human was teaching her something different, that patience and endurance could be just as strong as strength itself. The next days brought more challenges. Nobles tried to embarrass him during council meetings, asking him questions about war and politics. What would a human know of ruling an empire? They sneered. But Daniel did not stumble. Instead, he listened carefully to each question, thought before answering, and spoke with clarity. He never claimed to know everything. He admitted when he did not understand, but always offered a perspective no one expected. Sometimes, he told them, an empire does not fall because its enemies are strong, but because its rulers stop listening to their people. The words shocked the court. No alien noble had spoken such a thing so openly. Yet the queen did not silence him. Deep inside, she knew he was right, but whispers of rebellion were already spreading. In the dark corners of the palace, disloyal generals spoke in secret. They despised the union with a human. To them it was weakness, a shame upon their queen. They began to gather followers, planning to strike. The queen did not yet know of this, but Daniel could sense unease. He noticed the way some guards avoided meeting his eyes, the way shadows lingered longer in the halls at night. One evening he told Arthelia quietly, "There are cracks in your walls, not the stone, but the people. Watch closely." She frowned, thinking he spoke only in riddles. But a seed of doubt took root in her mind. Still, despite the storm that was forming beyond their sight, something inside the palace had begun to change. Some of the younger soldiers, once mocking, now looked at Daniel with curiosity. They remembered the race, his calm words, his quiet wisdom. They began to follow him in secret, asking him about endurance, about patience, about human ways. The queen watched this silently. For the first time, she saw her husband not as a burden forced upon her by duty, but as someone shaping her people in ways she could not. And though she would never admit it aloud, she began to wonder if this human, so ordinary in appearance, might hold within him a strength that her entire empire had failed to see. But the day would come soon, when his hidden qualities would no longer be questioned by whispers or races. A storm of rebellion was on its way, and only then would the queen discover the full measure of her human husband's true strength. The palace of Queen Arthelia stood tall against the evening sky, its black towers glowing faintly with the energy of old stones. But behind the shining walls, whispers grew louder. Dark plans were being made in hidden chambers, away from the queen's eyes. Generals who once swore loyalty now gathered in secret. Their voices were filled with anger. "This union with a human weakens us," one growled, his scaled fist striking the table. "Our queen bends to outsiders. If she continues, our empire will crumble." Another, older and more cunning, leaned forward. "Then we must take action. Strike before the human gains influence. The people still respect her power, but if they see her tied to weakness, they may lose faith. We will remove him, and perhaps her as well." Thus, rebellion was born in the shadows of loyalty. Daniel, though unaware of the full plot, sensed unease. He noticed the way certain guards whispered when he walked by, how servants avoided looking at him, how meetings grew tense when his name was mentioned. His instincts, sharpened by his past on Earth, told him that something was coming. One night, as he sat beside Queen Arthelia on the high balcony, he spoke softly. "Your Majesty, there is unrest among your own. I see it in their eyes." Arthelia frowned. "You think I do not notice? I know there are cracks, but rebellion in my palace? That would be madness." "Madness," Daniel said quietly, "is often born when pride feels wounded, and pride is a dangerous enemy." She studied him for a long moment. His words carried weight, not as threats, but as truths. Deep inside, she felt a chill, though she did not admit it aloud. The storm came, sooner than expected. On the night of a great festival, when the city below the palace shone with fires and music, the rebels made their move. While the people celebrated, armed forces slipped into the palace through secret paths. Their leader, General Kravos, a towering figure with crimson armor, carried a blade that had seen many wars. His eyes burned with hatred. "The queen has lost her way," he shouted to his followers. "Tonight we return strength to the empire." Chaos erupted. Torches were thrown, alarms rang, and soldiers clashed in the corridors. The peaceful music of the festival turned into the roar of battle. Queen Arthelia stood in the throne room when the first wave of rebels broke through. Her guards rushed to defend her, but the attackers were many. She drew her sword, its edge glowing with golden fire, and cut through their ranks with fury. Yet even as she fought, she realized the attack was larger than expected. The rebellion was not just a whisper, it was an army. At her side, Daniel appeared, not in armor, but in the simple dark clothes he always wore. He carried no great weapon, only a short blade he had taken from a fallen guard. "Stay behind me," she ordered sharply. But Daniel did not obey. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes calm. He moved with surprising precision, striking at rebels, who tried to surround her. His blade found weak points, his movements quick and calculated. Though he lacked the raw power of the alien warriors, his skill was undeniable. Arthelia's eyes widened as she fought beside him. She had never seen him like this. His calm patience, once mocked, now became deadly focus. He moved not with rage, but with clarity, as if every strike had been thought of long before it landed. The throne room floor became a storm of clashing steel and flashing light. Daniel ducked under heavy blows, countered with sharp strikes, and used the rebels' own weight against them. Where others used brute force, he used timing and precision. Still, the rebels pressed hard. Queen Arthelia cut down 3 at once, but more kept coming. A spear nearly struck her side, but Daniel blocked it with his blade, pushing her back into safety. "You fight like you have done this before," she muttered, shocked. He only gave a small smile. "Strength is not always in the body, Your Majesty. Sometimes it is in preparation." Word of the rebellion spread through the palace. Loyal soldiers rallied, but confusion reigned. Some nobles fled in fear, others locked themselves in chambers. Fires began to climb the walls, smoke filling the air. The queen realized they could not hold the throne room forever. "We must move," she said. Daniel nodded. He quickly studied the room, then pointed to a side passage. "That way. It leads to the training grounds. If we gather the loyal guard there, we can regroup." Arthelia blinked. "How do you know that path?" "I listen," he replied simply. "Servants talk. Soldiers boast. I remember what they say." Surprised again, she followed him. Together with a handful of guards, they fought through the passage. Rebels pursued them, but Daniel guided them through side routes, avoiding ambushes, turning corners where the attackers did not expect. His knowledge of the palace, though he had lived there only weeks, was astonishing. At the training grounds, they found a group of loyal soldiers under heavy attack. Daniel did not wait for orders. He climbed onto a platform and shouted, his voice carrying across the chaos. "Stand firm. Do not fight in rage, fight in unity. Guard your queen, not your pride." The soldiers, surprised that the human dared command them, hesitated. But then, seeing the queen at his side, they rallied. Together, they pushed back the rebels with new strength. The queen fought fiercely, her blade burning bright. But even as she struck, her eyes often flicked toward Daniel. She saw how he moved, how he directed soldiers with hand signals, how he turned a hopeless defense into a steady line. He was no ordinary man. Hours passed. The rebellion roared through the night, but the palace did not fall. Under Daniel's guidance, the loyal guard regained control of key halls. Fires were put out, rebels pushed back. Finally, near dawn, the last attackers fled into the shadows. Exhausted, Queen Arthelia stood among the ruins of her training grounds. Her golden cloak was torn, her blade covered in soot. Around her lay fallen soldiers, both loyal and rebel, and at her side stood Daniel, his clothes burned, his blade broken, but his eyes still steady. She turned to him, her voice heavy. "Who are you really?" Daniel met her gaze without fear. "A man who keeps his promises. I swore to honor this bond. That means standing with you, even when the world turns against you." For the first time, the queen felt her pride break. Not in shame, but in awe. She had married him thinking he was weak, a symbol forced upon her by politics. But tonight he had shown her strength she could not measure in muscle or power. His strength was endurance, wisdom, courage, and loyalty. And though the rebellion was not yet fully crushed, one thing was certain. The human she had once dismissed would play a role far greater than she ever imagined in the battles to come. The sun rose slowly over the black stone palace, painting the sky with a red glow. Smoke still lingered from the fires of the night before. The halls carried the scent of ash and steel, reminders of the rebellion that had shaken the heart of the empire. Queen Arthelia walked among the ruins of her training grounds, her golden cloak torn but her head still held high. Her people looked to her for strength, yet she knew that what had saved them last night was not only her blade, but also the man walking silently beside her. Daniel, her human husband, looked different now. His simple clothes were torn, his arms covered in bruises, yet his steps were steady. He carried no weapon, but his presence alone brought comfort to the soldiers who passed him. They bowed slightly, not out of duty, but out of respect. For the first time, whispers in the palace carried a different tone. That human, he stood with us. He led the defense when we faltered. Perhaps there is more to him than we thought. Arthelia heard these words, and though she did not show it on her face, her heart stirred. She had once believed this marriage was only politics, but now she began to see it as something more. Still, the danger was far from over. General Kravos, the leader of the rebellion, had escaped with many of his followers. Reports came in that he was gathering forces outside the city, preparing for a second strike. The palace was no longer safe. The empire itself was in danger. In the war council that morning, tension filled the air. Alien nobles argued loudly, their voices colliding like thunder. Some wanted to send out the army at once to crush Kravos. Others feared another battle would weaken the capital even further. "He will strike again," one noble shouted. "If we fight now, the city will burn," another countered. "Perhaps we should end this shameful union and bargain with Kravos for peace," a third muttered. That last suggestion brought silence to the chamber. Every eye turned toward the queen, waiting for her reaction. Her golden eyes flashed with anger, but before she could speak, Daniel stepped forward. He did not raise his voice, but his calm words cut through the noise. "Peace made by betrayal is not peace. If you give in to him, he will only demand more. The empire must stand firm, but not in chaos. You have strong soldiers, yes, but they lack direction. Last night proved that strength without unity is fragile. What you need now is order, strategy, and leadership," the nobles murmured. Some glared at him, offended that a human dared speak in the council. But others, remembering the night before, stayed quiet. Arthelia studied him, her heart caught between pride and awe. She had led armies, crushed rebellions, ruled with power. Yet this human spoke with such clarity, as if he could see the battlefield even before it began. Finally, she spoke. "Very well. We will not wait for Kravos to come. We will meet him outside the city, and we will fight not with scattered rage, but with unity." She looked at Daniel. "You will stand beside me in this battle." The council gasped. A human standing with the queen on the battlefield? It was unheard of, but Arthelia's decision was final. That evening, preparations began. The army gathered in the wide plains beyond the capital. Shields glimmered, banners waved, and war drums shook the ground. Soldiers stood in long lines, waiting for their queen. When Arthelia appeared on her great black steed, her golden cloak shining in the wind, cheers erupted. She raised her blade high, its edge glowing with fire. "We fight for the Empire," she shouted, and her people roared in return. But when Daniel stepped forward beside her, the cheers turned into uneasy murmurs. He wore no shining armor, only the same dark clothes, though now reinforced with light plates. In his hands was not a massive alien weapon, but a simple spear, balanced and sharp. "Why does he stand with her?" someone muttered. "He is no warrior," another sneered. "Last night he saved us," a soldier whispered. "Perhaps we should watch before we judge." Then the enemy came. Kravos's forces marched across the plains, their red banners burning, against the sky. At their front rode Kravos himself, his crimson armor bright in the sun, his blade raised high. His voice carried across the field. "Arthelia, your time is over. Your empire will rise again, without humans." The armies clashed. The ground shook as soldiers collided, blades and spears striking in waves of chaos. At the heart of the battle, Arthelia fought like a storm. Her sword cut through ranks of rebels, her golden cloak flowing behind her like fire. But even as she fought, she noticed Daniel nearby. He did not rush into the thickest crowd. Instead, he moved along the lines, watching, guiding, shouting instructions. "Hold your line. Shield to shield. Don't chase them. Make them come to you." His voice carried calmness, not panic. Soldiers who once doubted him now listened. They shifted their formation, closing gaps, moving like one body. The rebels, expecting chaos, suddenly found themselves facing a wall of unity. Daniel's spear struck only when needed. He aimed not for strength but for precision, cutting ropes, breaking weapons, disarming enemies. Every move weakened the rebels' rhythm. Arthelia, fighting at his side, felt something strange. For the first time in her life, she was not carrying the burden of battle alone. Daniel was not stronger than her in raw power, but he was giving her army something she had never been able to give fully: discipline without fear, courage without pride. Hours passed. The rebels pushed hard, but each time they tried to break the line, Daniel's calm voice restored order. Soldiers began to trust him. Some even shouted his name. Finally, Kravos himself charged forward, cutting through the line with his crimson blade. He roared, his armor blazing, and aimed straight for the queen. Arthelia met him head-on. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. She was strong, but Kravos was relentless. Blow after blow pushed her back. Her soldiers tried to reach her, but the rebel leader forced them away. Then Daniel stepped between them. With only his spear, he faced the giant warrior. Gasps filled the battlefield. "Human, step aside." Kravos laughed cruelly. "You are no match for me." Daniel's eyes did not waver. "Perhaps not, but I don't need to defeat you. I only need to remind you, you are not invincible." Kravos struck, his blade slashing with deadly force. Daniel dodged narrowly, his movement sharp and precise. He used his smaller size to his advantage, staying just out of reach, forcing Kravos to waste energy. Every step Daniel took bought the queen time to recover. At last Arthelia surged forward, her golden blade striking in a burst of power. With Daniel distracting Kravos, she found the opening she needed. Her sword pierced through the rebel's defense, sending him crashing to the ground. The battlefield froze. Rebels, seeing their leader fall, broke into panic. Loyal soldiers surged forward, their voices echoing across the plains. Within moments, the rebellion shattered. Silence followed. The field was littered with weapons and banners, but the Empire still stood. Queen Arthelia stood tall, her chest rising with heavy breaths. Daniel stood beside her, bruised and exhausted but still calm. She turned to him, her voice quiet so only he could hear. You saved me. Not just me, my empire." Daniel shook his head. "I only reminded them of what they already had. Unity, strength. It was always here." Her golden eyes softened. For the first time she allowed herself to smile. That night, as the army returned in triumph, the people no longer whispered doubt. They spoke his name with respect. "The human saved us." The queen's husband is strong in ways we never knew. And in her heart, Queen Arthelia realized the truth. She had thought of him as weak, a symbol of peace forced upon her. But he had revealed strength greater than any sword, strength of patience, wisdom, and courage. For the first time since their union, she looked at Daniel not as a duty, but as an equal, perhaps even more. The capital city was alive with celebration. Bright banners stretched across streets, drums thundered, and the people sang of victory. Fires that once marked rebellion now burned as symbols of unity. The empire had survived, and the rebel threat had been crushed. But inside the palace, Queen Arthelia did not rest. She walked through the great halls slowly, her golden cloak brushing against the black stone floor. Her eyes studied every detail. The cracks left from battle, the wounded, soldiers resting in corners, the weary servants cleaning ash from the walls. Victory had come, but it carried a cost, and beside her walked Daniel, her human husband. He was not dressed as a king, nor did he wear medals like her generals. His clothes were plain, his body marked with bruises and cuts, yet his presence was strong. Wherever he walked, soldiers bowed, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. The whispers that once mocked him had turned into voices of admiration. He fought with us. He guided us when all seemed lost. The queen's husband is no weakling. He is strength of another kind. Arthelia heard these words, and for the first time, she felt no sting of shame from her union. Instead, she felt pride. That evening, she gathered her council. The nobles entered the chamber nervously, their usual arrogance quieted. They had once mocked the human openly, calling him a burden. Now their eyes could not meet his. The queen rose from her throne, her voice clear and sharp. "You doubted this bond, you questioned my decision, but last night you saw the truth. Strength is not only in power of arms, it is in wisdom, patience, and courage. Daniel proved this. He stood beside me not as a shadow, but as an equal." The chamber was silent. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their heads. None dared speak against her. Then Daniel stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady. "I am not here to replace your traditions. I am not here to rule your people. But I promise to honor this bond, and that means standing with your queen and your empire. I am not alien. I am human. Yet if we stand together, our differences can become our strength." His words were simple, but they struck deeply. The council, though proud, could not deny the truth. When the meeting ended, Arthelia walked with him through the quiet halls. She looked at him, her golden eyes softer than they had ever been. "You have changed much in so little time," she said quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "I haven't changed. I only showed what I already was. It just took a battle for you to see it." She stopped, turning fully to him. "I misjudged you. I saw only a fragile man forced upon me. But now, I see someone I can trust. Someone I can stand beside." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. In that silence, the distance between queen and human began to fade. In the weeks that followed, the empire slowly healed. Streets were rebuilt, soldiers returned to their families, and the wounds of rebellion began to close. Yet something else grew stronger than stone walls, the bond between Arthelia and Daniel. He no longer walked the palace as an outsider. Servants greeted him with bows, soldiers sought his advice, and even children of the court looked up to him with admiration. They whispered stories of how he faced the rebel general, how he had turned the tide of battle with nothing but calm words and clever guidance. But what mattered most was the change within the queen herself. She no longer treated him as a duty, a silent partner meant only to satisfy politics. She began to ask for his thoughts and counsel, to share her doubts with him in private, to listen when he spoke of balance and patience. One evening, as they stood together on the high balcony overlooking the city, Arthelia spoke softly. "I once thought strength was only in power. My blade, my armies, my empire. But you have shown me another kind of strength, one that does not fade when the sword grows dull." Daniel looked at her, the wind carrying his quiet reply. "True strength is not in crushing others. It is in protecting what matters. That is what I saw in you from the start." For the first time, the queen felt her heart soften beyond the weight of her crown. She realized that the man beside her was not only her husband by duty, he had become her partner by choice. But respect is not earned in a single battle. It must be proven again and again. The empire's borders were still restless, and enemies beyond the stars watched closely, waiting to strike. Arthelia knew more challenges would come, yet now she did not fear them as before, for she knew she was not alone. When threats rose in the outer colonies, Daniel suggested sending not just armies but envoys to listen to the people's grievances. When nobles argued for more conquests, he reminded them of the cost of pride. His ideas were not always welcomed, but slowly, his influence began to shape the empire. Arthelia often watched him as he spoke, her heart heavy with something she had never allowed herself before: admiration. His strength was not loud, not boastful. It was quiet, steady, unshaken. And it made her realize that she had found not just a husband, but a true partner. Months later, during a great celebration marking the empire's survival, the people gathered in the central square. The queen appeared before them, her golden crown shining. At her side stood Daniel, no longer a stranger to their eyes. Arthelia raised her voice so all could hear. "This is Daniel, my husband. He is not of our kind, yet he has shown strength, greater than many of us. He has stood when others fled, guided us when others faltered. Let him be known not as an outsider, but as one of us." The crowd erupted in cheers. The sound rolled like thunder across the city. Soldiers pounded their spears, children waved banners, and the people cried his name with pride. Daniel bowed his head humbly, his eyes meeting Arthelia's. For a moment, amid the roar of her people, it felt as though they stood alone. Queen and human, ruler and partner, bound not by politics but by choice. That night, as the city celebrated below, Arthelia and Daniel stood together once more on the balcony. The stars stretched wide above them, endless and bright. "You have given me something no army could," Arthelia said softly. "Not just victory, but faith. Faith that I can share my crown, my burden, and my heart." Daniel reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "And you have given me a place where I belong, not as a symbol, but as a man beside his queen." In that quiet moment, the bond between them was sealed, not only in ceremony or politics, but in trust, respect, and something deeper that neither had expected when this union began. The empire would face many challenges in the years ahead, wars, trials, and storms yet unseen. But no matter what came, the alien queen and the human she married would face them together. And every time she looked at him, Arthelia remembered the night of rebellion, the battle on the plains, and the calm strength that had saved her empire. The strength that stunned her, humbled her, and forever bound her to the human she once thought weak, yet who proved to be stronger than them all.